On this episode of Locked On Lightning, we're talking about last night's 5-3 win to open up the season, what our takeaways emotionally, mentally, and looking forward to the rest of the season. All that coming up on this episode of Locked On Lightning. But first, let's play that music.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. This episode of Locked On Lightning is brought to you by our friends over at Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code Locked On NHL to get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. On this episode, we're mentally digesting last night's win, 5-3 win over the Nashville Predators at home to open up the season. And if you haven't already done so, because I kind of saw some comments here and there in my Twitter inbox or X or whatever. I'm not sure what we're calling it yet. For the time being, I'm going to be calling it Twitter. But I saw some people giving me their 2 cents about last night's game, and going to give you mine. I mean, we'll be doing a deep dive over the next couple of days, just because the Lightning don't play until the weekend. So we have time to kind of slow burn this post-game recap, which first of the year. So Lightning win 5-3, get off to a great start. And that was really the talking point I had pretty much for the last month or so, and really have been kind of nailing this home for the last couple of years with this Lightning team. Because if you're a regular listener of this podcast, you know that my biggest qualms with the Lightning, whether it was during the years that they have won Stanley Cups or even last year, where it was just a really big struggle for this team throughout the course of the season. And that was just starting early, getting things going. We know that they were one of the best teams in the NHL. Really, as the games got as they really progressed, but at the same time, it's hard to really constantly come back from big deficits or even small deficits, because you can't come back and win games every single game. It's just statistically impossible. But very good way to start the season. A lot of good things to look at, just looking at the box score. And that's how we're going to approach this recap, I think. Just looking at the box score, and then over the next couple of episodes, that being Thursday and as well as Friday, we'll be looking more at the film, talking about certain things. So go ahead and subscribe to the podcast, hit that notification button if you haven't already done so, because as soon as these episodes drop, you definitely want to listen to them. Listen to them in order, as we're peeling away the onions of this 5-3 win over the Nashville Predators. So looking at the stats, I'm going to start off with Jonas Johansson. Faced 31 shots, stopped 28, only gave up 3 goals. Save percentage of .903. And one of those goals was a power play goal. So not really going to get crazy about it. As we all know, Lightning are prone to giving up a lot of penalties and putting their goaltenders and just really they're themselves in deeper holes than what they really need to be. But you know what? I have to say, looking at this and looking at the first game of the season and looking at Johansson, really good start to the season, because when we came into this season and we're looking at all the things that were gonna be issues for this Tampa Bay Lightning team, we didn't really know until about a couple of weeks ago that the Andrei Vasilevskiy thing was going to happen. We could all still be frustrated about it, but I'm whatever about it at this point. He's injured, got the surgery, and now we just have to wait and bide our time. But good start to the season, very positive outcome. I think what this does, especially for Johansson, especially for the Tampa Bay Lightning, is that now going forward without their biggest ace in the deck, and let's be honest, not having Andrei Vasilevskiy is definitely missing your ace in the hole. Puts a lot of pressure on your players, puts a lot of pressure even on the goaltender standing in his crease, and that's Johansson. And I saw I went back on some highlights today after the game last night, and I have to say, um, the one thing that really stood out to me is that his composure. And I think that's a big deal when you look at a guy like that. Like when we were talking about him leading up to the regular season, is that he never really has started that much before. He's never been a consistent starter. Where even though we'll probably get some guest appearances from a couple of names here and there to fill in for him, this is, I think, for the most part, his net until Vasilevskiy comes back in a couple of months. And so far, he looked like a guy who's been doing this for quite some time. And I'm not saying, goaltending, because he's been in the league for quite some time. I'm talking more starting. And that really speaks volumes to me. And I think that is something that really going forward, if he continues to build upon it, especially with these next three games coming up, as we'll get into that in the next segment, what the next, maybe the rest of the month will look like for the Tampa Bay Lightning, as well as Johansson's starts. I think that really that is a big deal. And I think that, we shouldn't get too excited. We shouldn't say, oh my God, this guy's going to be amazing. When Vasilevskiy comes back, let's have them platoon in the net. No, that's not going to happen. As soon as Vasilevskiy comes back from injury, unless Cooper thinks that maybe it's not time for him to just get thrown back there and start 20 games in a row or whatever. I think that it's Vasilevskiy's net. But I think at the same time, I think that Johansson could definitely make a case for him getting a little bit more starts than maybe what the typical Lightning backup goaltender would normally get in years past. So looking at other players from last night that really stood out, obviously for a lot of Lightning players, a lot of Lightning fans, the name that stands out is Nikita Kucherov. Scored twice last night, scored that first goal of the season and of the game, 9:48 into the game on a slap shot, assist from Hedman and Point. I kind of alluded to it when we were talking about him in his player preview. And really, this is the same thing that we've been talking about for the last couple of years, is that it really, at the end of the day, and especially now more than ever, especially with the way that Stamkos kind of has been going over the last, I guess, since last year, really, we started to see the decline. And I'm happy, by the way, just real quick point, I'm happy to see that there are a lot more people than I really thought that agree with me that the Stamkos situation, or this playing the Stamkos on the first line, is not something that is going to work out long term. And I think at the end of the day, especially when it comes down to this team and Stamkos' strengths and him not being not having him be the focus of the offense, I think at the end of the day, everything on the first line should run through Kucherov. And I don't think that's an outlandish thing to say, because when you look at his skill set and you look at what he could do when he doesn't have the puck, when he does have the puck, he's not only just a smart, intellectual hockey player, but he's just so physically gifted with his talents and so skillful. And last night you saw it really. I mean, for the most part, Whenever he was on the ice and there was and all those players around him, you could just tell that the other team couldn't really the Predators couldn't really decide whether or not they should focus all their attention on him or focus on the other players on the ice. And like I've said numerous times in the past, at the end of the day, that is the key to the Lightning success. You know, it's one thing when you're missing big time players like Vasilevskiy, when you're missing Stamkos, but I think it completely changed the dynamic of this team when you're missing a guy like Kucherov, and which is why I've stated numerous times that it's so important that this guy stay healthy, because if he can, this team will really, really can afford to miss other players, because you know when you have a guy like that who is really the lifeblood of this team, there's really not much you can accomplish. So really excited to see how the Lightning can build off that, and we'll continue to talk about that. Like I said, in the coming days, we'll be doing a little bit more deep dives into this game. Some things we like, some things we didn't like. Go into a little bit more of a deep dive recap tomorrow. So you definitely want to check. Don't want to miss out on that. So please go ahead and subscribe to the pod. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form, and hit that notification button. So we'll be talking about the rest of the schedule, what our predictions are for the rest of the month. At least I know it's only one game, but listen, if you're a listener of this pod for quite some time, you know I love predicting the rest of the month schedule. So definitely stick around for that. But first, I want to talk about our friends today over at the Sleeper app. Now, if you don't have any knowledge of what the Sleeper app is, guess what? I'm here to tell you. I use it personally as well. The NHL season is finally here, and the Lightning have the season we've been yearning for. I absolutely love the NHL, and I know you do too. And that's why I want to tell you all about the Sleeper app. The Sleeper app is the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. It's my go-to for daily sports, not only hockey, but I use it for football as well, but especially daily fantasy hockey. With Sleeper, you could win 100 times cash on a daily fantasy. I love it because it's super easy to use. It gives you all this in-depth information about players, probabilities, all that stuff. I love it. So use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL. You'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's Locked On NHL. See Sleeper's terms for use for details. So once again, as always, I like to thank everybody for making this your first listen of the day. And if you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're almost there. We're getting there. I think we're nearing 720. Would like to get to 1,000. We could only get it to by having you guys help us out there. And, it helps the channel out a lot, helps us reach a lot of listeners and viewers, and helps the podcast grow. And it's all up to you guys. So thank you for your enthusiasm if you're subscribed. And if you haven't already done so, what are you doing? Go ahead and hit that notification button as well and subscribe. So as soon as the newest episode drops, you'll be notified. And so we're looking at the rest of the schedule. And like I said, if you were looking for a stereotypical recap, what I decided to do, since the Lightning don't play for quite some time, is Saturday in Detroit. I'm kind of progressing with the recap. And so we're going to put a nail in that, look forward for the rest of the month, do our little way too early season prediction for the rest of the month. And so as the season goes on, this is what we got for the rest of the month of October for the Tampa Bay Lightning. You got 3 games on the road: Detroit, Ottawa, and Buffalo. That's on the 14th, 15th, and 17th. And then they're back home on the 19th against the Canucks. And then that Saturday, the 21st, you got Toronto. And then the following Tuesday is Carolina. That Thursday, the 26th, is San Jose. And the 30th is the Seattle Kraken at home. And I like this. This is a tough schedule. And this is the way I like it. I like the Lightning to get their tough games somewhat out of the way because, I mean, the Lightning will be playing all these teams again at some point, especially we'll be playing Detroit, Ottawa, Buffalo, Toronto, numerous times throughout the course of the season. So it's not like we're going to go a long way without seeing these guys. But this is a good early test. And I think win or lose, it's a positive thing for the Lightning on Saturday because, as we know in years past, Detroit's a tough team. Ottawa is just a pain in the butt. Buffalo, I think that they still have a lot to prove. I think they were very exciting last year. Very admirable performance by those guys, but still very much a lot to learn. You know, it's one thing to do it in one season, but to make it consistent in consecutive seasons is a whole nother animal. And this team is still pretty young, so very curious to see how they show up this year, especially in this division that I think has just gotten even better. And then you got Vancouver, who I think is going to be another dumpster fire this year. Toronto, I think that that's going to be another matchup for the Lightning where we're just going to get back and forth, topsy-turvy games, flip of the coin matchups where really those games could really just be decided by a bad bounce or a deflected shot. I mean, those are the games where there's just so much history with these two teams over the last couple of years. So much bad blood, so much, just animosity from both sides. You know, it playing each other in consecutive years and having those playoff matchups. That I think that's really what kind of changes dynamics, especially if it's against a division rival. It just takes it up a notch, and having those games during the regular season, it's those games where, unless the Lightning completely fall flat on their faces in any of those games, as long as it's a close game, and if they lose, it's just one of those things where you can't really be upset about it. The best example is a couple of years ago, going into the bubble right before COVID hit, that big game against Boston. That was the big time rivalry, Boston and Tampa. I mean, even though those two teams didn't necessarily play each other in the playoffs, I still thought that that was the kind of games that, what we'll see from Toronto, because those teams were vying for a top spot in the division. And every time the Lightning go to Boston, it seems as though that there's a fight or some massively crazy game that goes on. And I think now we're in the territory of having that with the Maple Leafs, and that's not a bad thing. And it's not like that kind of scenario either, where we're going into those games scared because, we might lose the game. No, the Lightning have proven that they could beat these guys. As always, I feel like with the Toronto Maple Leafs, I feel like they've made minor improvements in the offseason, but they haven't really done anything major in order to get themselves over that hump. Like I stated on yesterday's episode, the thing with Toronto is that, even though we played really abysmal in that series, we were on the verge of making a comeback. And I'm sure that's something that maybe to a certain extent is in the back of some of these Lightning players' minds. I doubt they really want to be thinking about that playoff series, but that just shows how close these two teams are. And those are the games I very much look forward to. And another game that I look very much forward to is the matchup with Carolina Hurricanes. If you've been a listener of Locked On NHL, the Thursday shows, I was a host with Locked On Avalanche host Chris Masilli for that for about, I want to say, 2 seasons. We stepped away from that this summer. But if you were a listener of that, you know that the Carolina Hurricanes are one of the teams I admire the most in the NHL, especially outside of the division. I think Carolina is one of those teams where they don't necessarily have to, they don't have a superstar on their team, and they've just been a massively successful team over the last couple of years. And it seems like They just get better and better and better. And I think that they're one of those teams that's on the verge of winning the Stanley Cup. I just think it's just one of those things where maybe it's just a bad matchup or just a bad call or a call that didn't go their way or, any one of those things. Just it wasn't their week or anything like that. But this is a team that I think is really going to do a good job. And if it were possible, I would love to see the Carolina Hurricanes play the Lightning at least once a week, which fortunately, since these two teams are not in the same division, that's not going to happen. But these are the two teams. This is a team where I always look forward to playing against, especially when the Lightning aren't playing well, when they're playing sloppy, is because the Hurricanes are completely the opposite. They're very, very disciplined. And they just always play the game the right way. And that's something that I really, really like to look forward to, because when the Lightning play teams like that, especially if they're not playing well, I think that's something that definitely straightens them out, and they're kind of forced into playing that way, almost kind of, just so they don't get embarrassed on that night. So definitely a matchup that you want to look forward to. And then the last two are San Jose. San Jose is going to be a lottery team. Lightning should not only win this game, but definitely, I wouldn't say embarrass, but I think that this is definitely a game where you could see Johansson get his first shutout of the year. I'm going to leave it at that. And then you got another team that was very close to the Stanley Cup Finals last year, and that was Seattle. Seattle, I think, is like Carolina West. I think they're very disciplined. I think they got a lot of good players on their team. And it's always nice to see Yanni Gord. So let me know in the comments below what you think about that. What do you think about the rest of the schedule for the month? Do you think the Lightning are going to go undefeated? I certainly don't. I'm sure they'll drop one here or there. Wouldn't be surprised if they don't lose a game till Toronto, as long as they play right. I think it's going to go that way. I think they'll at least drop 2 games this month, which is perfectly fine. Every game except Toronto, Carolina, and Seattle is a very winnable game. And if they go 2 out of 3 against those 3 teams I just listed off, then that's a successful run, and I'll take it. And then we'll bury our heads and look into November. So let me in the comments below what you think about that. And in a moment, we'll wrap things up and just a little bit savor in more about what happened last night and just going forward in just a little bit. First, I want to talk about our friends over at Jase Medical. Now, Jase Medical is one of the best companies out there if you're looking to improve your health, because they provide 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. If you want to be prepared, this is the place you got to go. All it takes to get a Jase case is to fill out a simple online form, and in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of their board-certified physicians. Get ongoing care from their physicians at any treatment-related questions. Doctor created, doctor recommended. Don't get caught prepared. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. Jase handles everything from online evaluations to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and outgoing consultation and care. So get 20% off on these life-saving antibiotics today from Jase Medical by using the code LOCKEDON at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. So wrapping things up on the show, as always, I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Subscribe to our channel. Follow us wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're available on YouTube. Go ahead and subscribe to that. Hit that notification button. Drop a comment below. What do you think about last night's game? Listen, 1-0 is better than 0-1. I'm not going to get too excited about it. I'm not going to sit here and say the Lightning are going to go 82-0. I'm not going to sit here and say that the Lightning are going to win the President's Trophy. I'm going to sit here and say that, and I'm sticking to it. And I'm going to say that every time until the Lightning lose a game. 1-0 is better than 0-1. And this is a game that they should have won, and they did. Check off the box. This is a game in which they need to go out and hit those guys in the mouth right away. They did that on the Kucherov goal, and they finished strong. And this is a game where the offense needed to roll through Kucherov. Boom, 2 goals. So they did everything right. Now, the key going forward, as we all know with Tampa Bay Lightning, is that they're going to need to replicate that on Saturday. And that is something that almost worries me, because that is not something that always happens with this team, as we all know. And I think that really, and I'm not going to sit here and say that it's easy to do that on a nightly basis. I know we plan and God laughs. That's just how it is. I think that the Lightning will just have to roll with the punches in games. They'll just have to go into these games with a game plan and have to really just do as much as they can to stick to that game plan, maybe change things here and there when need be. I know that Detroit's going to make things as difficult as possible on Saturday. I know that Ottawa is just going to cause all hell for this team coming up on Sunday. And then you got another tough matchup at that point coming in on Tuesday with the Buffalo Sabres. So really just, it doesn't have to be to the letter. I mean, it's not going to be Kucherov every night. It could be Point, it could be Hagel. It could be even a defenseman. It could be Hedman. Nick Paul getting involved last night was phenomenal. Hagel got a goal last night as well. That's phenomenal. Those are the guys, like I said in the offseason, those are the guys that need to be involved. Not Steven Stamkos on every single pass. You don't have to throw him 3-4 passes in the span of a sequence and you know, have an offensive sequence revolve around him. No, that's not how you're going to win games. It's going to be guys like Nick Paul, Kuch, Hagel, Point, Sergachev even firing it from the shot from the point, excuse me, Sherry, Sorelli, guys like that, guys like Tyler Mott. That's how you win hockey games. And if the Lightning could do some sort of version of that on a nightly basis, we're definitely going to be picking up a lot more wins than we'll be picking up losses. So we'll be back tomorrow with a more in-depth recap. So as always, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Hit that notification button if you are subscribed to us on an app-based streaming platform. So in the meantime, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.